Hi, and welcome to this webinar, The End of Enterprise Content Management. What happened to content is king? Dare I say content management is dead? I sound a little bit like Nietzsche. Let's get moving on anyways. Who am I? I'd just like to introduce myself first before we jump into this. My name is Robert Pinnock. I'm in charge of channel and business development here at Concept Searching, which is now part of Netrix. I have over 10 years of experience in the SharePoint space. I'd say probably closer to 15. Around very early days in the SharePoint area. Wrote a couple of books on SharePoint Search back in 2010. Have worked in both records management and infrastructure management for SharePoint, but most of my time was in information retrieval. I'm a board member of the Vancouver Office 365 user group. We're meeting tomorrow night. Anyone local to Vancouver, please come out. And I also have organized SharePoint Saturday. I am indeed an information management enthusiast. I love information. I love seeing how it's managed and working with it, and a certified information professional. So I'll be your guide today on this investigation of what we're calling now content services. So a little quick agenda, a couple of housekeeping items. What is who we are, sorry. What is Concept Searching and why am I here talking? What our technology does and why it is unique. I think that's an important part to talk about. Then we'll talk about content services platforms and why you should care about those now instead of content management. Talk a little bit about Microsoft's content services platform. It's very important. It's not the only system that we work with, but it is very important for most customers that we have to understand how that content services platform is moving forward. And then we'll talk a little bit about where we fit. I'll do a live demonstration of two use cases that I think are quite interesting, very different use cases, but that I think are quite interesting for this content services scenario. And then we'll just say what's happening next. A couple of housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded, and everyone who attends or registers will get a link to watch the recording. Of course, it's not going to be so entertaining as seeing it live, but you will get a recording. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Depending on time, I may or may not be able to answer them at the end. Otherwise, you will get an answer. So if something pops in your head during the webinar that you think is interesting or is curious or that even others might be interested in, please feel free to put it in the chat and we will we'll address it for you. Great. So who is Concept Searching? We were founded in 2002 as a search engine company. And it was because of our founders' interest in statistics and mathematical analysis that led them to build a search engine that could understand what the content was about and index large amounts of content and return it with really some great context. And that was based on our compound term processing engine. We very quickly changed because of customer demand to being a classification vendor. Because our customers could see that our search engine understood what their content was about, they asked us to help tag that content too. Over the last 15 years, the technology has shifted pretty much completely away from being a search engine, although that is still our core, to being a classification tool. And that, as we'll see, has a lot of great areas where it can help you with content. Just in November, Concept Searching was acquired by Netrix Corporation, which is one of the leading security and user auditing companies in the world. So we're very proud to be part of Netrix now. Our technology platform will allow you to classify content across many disparate systems and make sense of that content, allowing you to leverage all sorts of different information for business processes. We have a lot of different customers. Most of them are large financial services or federal government customers that really have a lot of data and need to get that data working for them. We do have customers in many different verticals though, so if you have a specific vertical solution need, please let us know and we can possibly match it to one of the projects that we've already done. Analysts love our product. We've been well acknowledged as having a great product. Most recently, we've been identified as a strong performer in the Forrester Wave for file analytics. We are government certified. As I mentioned, the product works well with a lot of government technologies, and there's a number of ways that government agencies can engage us to easily use the product. And of course, we're part of the Microsoft certified independent software vendor community. And we're also part of the Microsoft Content Services Partner Program, which is a great new program. It's only been a couple years now, where the top companies in the content services space, this new space, come together and talk about how we can support Microsoft's move to get content more effectively used. So what's the technology? Well, concept searching believes very strongly that you need to take control of your information in order to make it valuable and usable in your business or organization. And the way to do that is to have a controlled vocabulary. This is really the key. Without a controlled vocabulary, your content is just a mess. It's just a lost pieces of pollen in the wind, if you will. So having a controlled vocabulary, which we build out as a taxonomy, will give you a backbone to all of the content you have and allow you to tag it, organize it, and make it useful. This helps in a number of different areas: security, records management, to improve search, to do text analytics to find out where your sensitive data is, to help in pre-migration analysis and to satisfy FOIA requests, do e-discovery. Any number of different things where you can imagine having better quality content is going to help you. We can help. The software is a platform. It sits on a Windows server. You can install it on premises or in the cloud if you want, as long as we have connectivity because of our back-end search technology. We just need to be able to crawl that content. We don't install agents anywhere, or it's not required. We don't sniff the network. What we do is completely scanning unstructured and structured dark data to surface those pieces of information that may be hidden in your organization and add value to them. What this gives you is the ability to do all sorts of metadata-driven scenarios, from pre-migration to content organization, to ROT analysis, deduplication, content enrichment to drive business processes, sensitive data discovery to reduce risk, information governance so you can control your content and make sure that the right people have it and those who don't, and that it's living its life cycle properly, improving search, and doing records management. What is different about our technology? Well, I think it's still unique. Sometimes I hear rumblings in the space that other people are doing similar stuff to us. But we also hear a ton of people who are running quickly down that artificial intelligence path. And our technology is still based 100% upon sound mathematical principles. We use a statistical engine that looks at all of your content, figures out what it's about, and then gives a statistical analysis to find out what the most important content is and match that so you can build your vocabulary and then tag your content. We have looked at AI, and right now we don't find that it works well enough, at least not as well as the technology we already have. We'll keep our eyes open for that. But for now, statistics are really the best way to make use of your content. The reason for that is that AI technology is generally a black box. We don't know what it's doing. It has some learning that it needs to do, and that can take a long time and require a great amount of data. With those mathematical principles, you can see exactly what your content is about and then learn with it to build out the exact right rules and match the content. We have some unique IP we call compound term processing, which allows us to find not just words, like a typical keyword type driven system, and there are some out there that just look for keywords in your content, but can also find phrases. And these phrases are what we call compound terms, because it's a term that has meaning, like our example here, triple heart bypass, but it's not a single word. And as you know, triple heart bypass is a thing. It is a surgical operation, but each one of these words on its own has its own meaning, or even a number of different meanings. And not having the ability to understand that it's one thing will give a lot of noise in your classifications. Whereas we can narrow that down, find related terms to complex concepts in your vernacular. And that's an important thing. We look at your content. We don't guess from some rule set we got somewhere else or from a data set that came from the internet. We look at your content and make a specific classification of the statistical values on the content that you have. So that's enough about us. Let's talk about content management. So content management was really a great move forward in the IT industry. We could take all of the content that our users were creating, Word documents, making PDFs, zooming around on email platforms, sending via FTP or in USB drives, and put it into a system that could create, store, distribute, discover, manage unstructured content. So now we have a system where we could put all of our content into and have some control over it. Ultimately, the goal was to derive business value and get that content contained and working and governed. And the problem with this, of course, was that enterprise content management was seen as a single bucket with many features. And most of those ECM systems didn't work for every single scenario that we may have needed. The content services platform, on the other hand, really consists of a bundle of services that is used to manage the entire life cycle of your content. It's a relatively new term that Gartner has coined and is really gaining acceptance. Most of the companies, us included, have said, okay, this is a good idea. We fit into this ecosystem with a content services platform. Let's talk about this instead of just being an add-on for an ECM. And the great thing about the content services platform is that it really addresses the reality of how content is created and how it's shared and how it's managed, distributed, and then eventually disposed of or archived, which most ECM systems tried to encapsulate, but just couldn't manage it on their own. So, as I mentioned, this was really coined by Gartner, and it's something that most vendors have picked up. Microsoft has a content services platform group, and is really embodied in their Office 365 platform, where they're adding all sorts of different types of tools. Sometimes it's a bit overwhelming, but all sorts of different types of tools in their teams and groups and Sway and OneDrive, SharePoint Online, in order to get that content managed and used and usable and collaborative for the entire organization. IDC Enterprise refers to content services within text. Forrester is still talking about enterprise content management, but refers to content services as well. AIM has decided to call it intelligent information management, which I think is a fitting term as well, because it is the whole scope of information management in an intelligent way. So let's look at the vendors. Our old enterprise content management vendors are listed on the left here. Excuse me. And our new content services vendors, platform vendors rather, are listed on the right. And as you can see, they're exactly the same. So most of these platform vendors have just changed from talking about ECM to talking about content services now. So let's dig a little bit into what a content services platform entails or consists of. It's really the same as ECM platform, but its focus is more on providing APIs and solutions and business tools for managing that content while interacting with other tools that you may get or components that you may get in order to drive content services or drive content through its life cycle. So most of these content services platforms have kind of the backbone for doing document management, driving business processes and workflows. They'll have records management capabilities. Some of them have better records management capabilities than others, including disposition and lifecycle management and legal holds and those kinds of things. And also the ability to do collaboration. Not to be left out is the ability to secure content and have different groups using different pieces of content and perhaps sharing it as well. They generally can be integrated with external non-native repositories, have APIs like the CMIS connector, which is the Content Management Interoperability Services connector, which allows them to work with other systems as well, and also have pre-packaged integrations. There's no vendor out there that has a better ecosystem and a group of independent software vendors as Microsoft, and I'll talk about that next. The content services platform and content services itself really consists of three things: a platform, the applications that you can install into that platform or develop in that platform that allows you to drive specific types of business cases, like managing contracts or managing projects or doing collaboration or managing diagrams or digital media or those kinds of things. Any kind of use case or vertical scenario that you may have. Let's say I'm in the oil and gas industry and I need an oil and gas application. Those are the kind of applications that can be built into these platforms that become a layer on the platform in order to drive your business around those. Then the last area is components. And these are what we generally called add-ons before. Software pieces that come in to add some value. Maybe they improve the search or add search. Maybe they add archiving or backup to the solution or enrich the content like we do. And concept searching really fits into this component scenario in this. Ooh. So what is the Microsoft Content Services Platform? Well, the Microsoft Content Services Platform is really Microsoft's throwing their, what's the idiom, into the ring of their products to manage enterprise content management in a broader scale. So we see the Office 365 platform, including the Office tools, Word, Excel, those kinds of things, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, all those tools working together to make content one full seamless cycle so that we can create content, manage that content, and store it, collaborate on it, and eventually dispose of it in one system. This really enables us as an independent software vendor and the independent software vendor ecosystem to build great solutions, whether those are those applications, excuse me, or components like ours that enrich the content and help you get those different pieces or that extension of the platform. And as I mentioned, we're one of the few charter members of the global Microsoft Content Services Platform. So these are partner program. So these are companies, and there's a number of them, I think 30 or something, of really the best systems integrators and independent software vendors who have been working in this space and add the most value to the Office 365 ecosystem. And really the tenets of this kind of platform are a holistic approach. We want everything to work together. We don't want to have any gaps there, and we want our content to move throughout that holistic system. And that's what drives content velocity. We don't want the content to get stalled or broken or lost throughout that process. So we want it to be able to move, and it has to be people-centric. If people get lost with the content, if they can't navigate it, if they can't understand how it's working, where it should go, they start moving things outside of the system, then we're not really people-centric. The user and their needs has to come before the system and its structure. I know we've heard that a million times, but really this is a good step towards that. And that was one of the big gaps with ECM. And I've heard this time and again. We have, I won't name any of the ECM vendors, but people come to me and say, we have this ECM system. Our users won't use it. It's too cumbersome. It doesn't work. It's frustrating for our users. So it has to be people-centric. And of course, around all of that and encapsulating all of those tenets, policy and security must be respected. We can't have data lost because our system is too loose, or our users are frustrated and they have to do something to actually get their job done that is not secure. So we have to have all of those tenets. And the pillars are really this cycle. That's the process that we harvest and create our content. We get content, we put it into the system and coordinate it and collaborate on it, and then we protect it. So where does concept searching fit in this scheme? Sounds like Microsoft and the content services platform vendors have got the answer to everything. But really, your content services drive needs to start very early on in the content's life cycle. A lot of vendors are talking about where we should store our content, how we should store content, what's the best place to put structured and unstructured content. They talk about where we should dispose of content, where we can back up content, where we can archive content, what to do with our content as if it's jelly beans or some other commodity that is just an understood commodity. But content is really a lot more than that. Every piece of content has its own personality, let's call it, its own signature. And this process we see at the top here, where content gets scanned, maybe that's old files, maybe it gets created by users. Maybe sometimes it has to be OCR'd. Then it gets put into our ECM system and our document management system. Then it gets worked on for a long time, and that's where the content usually lives, is in this content services platform and worked on. Excuse me. And then it's either disposed of or archived. But along this process, there is a very important step that we're not often missing, and that's where we come in. And that's what I call the magic, where the content can be analyzed and then tagged, put fingerprints on it to understand what its personality is, where it needs to belong, what we can do with it, and surface information so we get much more value out of our content than just having a place to store millions of jelly beans. So we can do file analysis, look into the content, look for redundant, obsolete, trivial content, look for duplicates, and help you decide what to do with those. We can reduce terabytes of content to gigabytes by getting rid of stuff that is not necessary to have. And this can save a lot in both your content services strategy, but also in your storage platform, whether you're using the cloud or on-premises storage. Why store old garbage? Really need to clean up. We can help with data security, compliance, and audit protection. We can go out there and look at your content, find out where your insecure content is, make sure it's compliant, and protect you from audits, which is a big threat. Organizations are fined millions every year because they are not able to meet audits, or because they have leaks of content. We can have help do content reorganization. Most content, especially legacy content, is not well organized. We can help you clean that up and move that content. Auto classification on demand. This will really help your users to avoid that time-taking and frustrating task of trying to figure out where that content should go and how it should be tagged. All of this drives vast search improvement. And if any of your users are telling you search sucks, why can't you make it work like Google? This is the key. Search is really a garbage in, garbage out problem in most cases. And you can do a lot with the search UI, but if you don't have good content, you're not going to get good search. So we can help with that. We can identify records and set content types or labels in Office 365 or SharePoint to manage those records. I worked in records management for a while, and people are always talking, or we were always talking about disposition, and records managers are worried about that. Organizations are worried about disposition. But really, disposition means nothing if you can't identify what is a record and put it into that process to be disposed. You can also complete Freedom of Information Act requests and similar kind of requests, whether maybe that's a GDPR right to be forgotten request or an e-discovery request. We can look for those and do it in record time so that you can find out where that information is and deliver on those requests, both accurately and quickly. So what is the key to all this? Excuse me. Still getting over a bout of hay fever, my apologies. So the key to this is really metadata. And as I talked about our controlled vocabulary as our backbone earlier, this is where that backbone gets implemented onto the content, is creating good metadata for your content. Metadata can transform your data into information and knowledge. And that's really what we need to drive our business, is that knowledge that is going to help improve our processes and help us make money. We all know that manual metadata generation, which is what we've all been doing for years now, is both prone to error and frustrating for our end users. What we really want to do is classification versus filing. The days of towers of filing cabinets in our offices are gone, and putting a file in one folder and having someone whose sole job was it to know where those files were is gone. What we need is classification. We need a number of different attributes on every file so that we can retrieve it at a moment's notice, wherever it may be. So we need to categorize based on appropriate hierarchies and these taxonomies that we can help build out that describe where your content is and what it's about. And of course, as I mentioned, having a good search is dependent on having contextual information that tells what the content is about, so users, when they search, they can find it. So why do you need concept searching to do this? Well, as I mentioned, we have unique technology that is proven in the market to work. It's not black box technology, and I'll show you that in a live demo in just a minute. And it automatically generates intelligent metadata. You can find information that you never knew existed, and you can eliminate your end users from having to do that tagging, which is huge. It's rule-based, but those rules are very flexible and they're fuzzy, so you can add weighting to them to make sure you get the right content. It also has a process where you can improve the rules, which is also very important. You can identify records, records that should have been declared that were never declared, records that were misdeclared, and get them into the proper disposition life cycle. You can also find privacy information and other kinds of content. And that leads me to my demo and the two use cases that I want to talk about. They're very different. Records management is one of them. Electronic records are pretty much 90% of all the records that you have in your organization. They're still on-premise records, physical records people have, but people are really moving away from that. Of course, people don't want to store paper anymore. So a lot of electronic records, and we can go in and find out what those records are and classify them and then get them protected and moved into that content services platforms records management lifecycle. This is great because this will work both when the record is in the right place or it's the wrong place. We don't have to rely on records libraries or out-of-place records management. We can have records pretty much live anywhere and be managed by the system if we can just identify them. There are so many issues with records that are resolved if we understand where that content is. The second challenge is for compliance. So this is a security space, and this is the space where we have grown the most in the last couple of years. Of course, it's always a concern for people. Where is my sensitive data? Is it protected? Is it managed properly? Who has access to it? And by using an auto classification tool, you can go out and find that sensitive content and then manage it effectively, identify it, delete it, quarantine it, change the permissions on it. It's super important. So let's start a demo. I'll just jump over to my demo site. We'll talk a little bit first about the records management scenario that I was talking about. So I have a SharePoint site here, and in my SharePoint site, I have contracts. And as you can see, I have this library for my contracts that has a content type, and I'm using content types to manage records in SharePoint. You can, of course, also use labels if you're in Office 365, and concept searching supports writing labels as well. But in this demo, I'll just talk about content types. You can see I have a few content types in this library, and one of them is a contract record, and the other is a project record. And as I upload content here, I want to have in-place records management, so I need a number of content types in order to manage those records in one library. I don't want to have a separate library for projects that are related to contracts. So I want to keep them here and be able to say this is a project record that is related to my contracts and not just a contract record. But I want to be able to define things as contract records as well, or be a non-record and just be a document. So in the manual scenario, I have to go through and say, okay, this is a contract record. I am going to save it as such. Then I can, of course, declare it as a record if I want in my ribbon here. But in most scenarios, you're going to deal with thousands of documents and users that don't want to specify these records classifications properly. I have one customer who has more than 100,000 records that are declared as 999-9 laundry basket, which means it's undeclared. Basically, we know it's a record, but we don't know what kind of record or what retention schedule it has. So in concept searching, we can go in and build a taxonomy. First of all, of course, we want to crawl all the source so we can find all this content. Then we can build a taxonomy for our records. And we can, of course, support a number of different taxonomies, as you can see here. But I have my records management file plan here, and I can say all of my records that are, say, contracts should have a specific records management classification. And this allows us to determine what exactly should be a contract and a contract record or a project record. We can build out fuzzy clues here. As I said, they're weighted. So I can say if it has this value, this term in it, then we'll give it a certain number of points to be a record. If it has some other terms in it, it should get a little bit less points. These are not so important, so they'll get less points. What this can allow you to do is find the things that are exactly contract records. We can, of course, also suggest clues. What other kinds of terms in our statistical index are similar to contract records? Maybe tariff surcharges is something that we want to add and give it a little bit of value, because tariff documents or tariff contracts are important to be records as well. And we can add value to that and create a clue for that, which is going to help drive those records classifications. This is really important because if you're just doing keyword matching with a system like AIP or the automatic discovery and my Office 365 labels, all you can really say is contract and purchasing or something like that, and then get back everything that has those terms in it, which is not really a very effective way to find those. So we can build out these complex rules. There's a number of different rules that we can add that are going to allow you to classify that content properly. Once you've got that, you can browse the content and see what was classified as a contract and what wasn't classified as a contract. I can see the classification values and help change my rules to get only the right contracts in here. I can easily add these to a positive working set or a negative working set, which will give them either a statistic boost or a statistical demotion based on what our understanding of that content is. What this allows you is a tool to quickly get all of the contracts and only the contract records, and then be able to classify them. Now, concept searching can write back this metadata as a managed metadata directly to the field for those contracts that we've identified them as, or we can create a workflow. And what this is an automated tool that can push some content or rule or metadata or trigger something in SharePoint or one of many other different kinds of ECM systems or content services platforms, I should say. And in this case, I'm going to look at making a records management classification for contracts. Very simple to set up. All I need to say is what rule do I want to set this as. I might want to say I need to use my file plan, and I want everything that is classified as a contract. I'm going to remove this one and save that. So now I've got my classification here. So everything that is classified as a contract in FIN 09 contracts, I am going to ask concept searching to write back to the content type of that item in SharePoint the value or set the value as a contract record. So this is super powerful. And what I can do then is scan through, look at all of the classifications I have in my taxonomy that are contract records or potential contract records, and then classify it as a contract record and change that content type. You can also do things like set email alert. So there's all sorts of different things that we can do with this workflow. So if you need an approval process or someone to be alerted that something was set as a contract type, a contract record content type, we can do that as well. We can also move things around. So if you have things on a file share or in another system like content server or SharePoint, you want to move it to that other server, we can do, or that other content services platform, we can do that as well. So super powerful way to manage records. Let's move on to the second use case, and that's our compliance use case. As I said, we've grown a lot in this space, and out of the box, the product comes with a number of different taxonomies for finding sensitive data. This is a really great way to use the product because we can go in and find exactly the sensitive content that you have and identify it and report on it. So we can see all of the PII, sensitive content, credit card numbers, specific terms and phrases that you think may be sensitive, dirty words, those kinds of things. As I mentioned, a lot of them come out of the box, like for example, US driver's license. So you can actually go in and find driver's licenses in all your content and decide whether they should be in those folders or they should be there at all, not. And even though people don't think that they should have this kind of sensitive content, it is really common that we do have these kinds of sensitive pieces of information in our content, whether we know it or not. Again, having this fuzzy matching rules, very important for being able to remove false positives. Most of these systems, again, that are doing keyword matching or maybe using some kind of black box technology, really have a problem giving too much matches and maybe missing proper content. So they both will give you too much garbage and miss the content that it should be capturing. And our fuzzy matching can allow us to look at what we've classified, try to find that content, and modify the rules, change the values so that we can actually get only the right pieces of content that we are looking for. Of course, we support regex and other ways to do more complex matching than just, let me choose a different one that has a regex that I can show you. So here's the insurance number. So you can add regexes. You can also do exclusions based on algorithms. So it's quite sophisticated in the way that it works, so that we can find exactly the right numbers and remove ones that are maybe false positive matches just because they have the right number pattern. The other advantage is that we can use this fuzzy matching to find out words that might be associated with that, really allowing us to reduce the amount of content that is coming back and only get the right content, but get all of the content as well, or all of the things that might be compliance matches on it. Also, the product will do OCR as well. So if you have things that are scans, one thing, story that I hear all the time is that people are asked to send their driver's license or their social security card scan to prove that they are who they are for whatever scenario. And these might get stored by mistake or moved around. So we can actually scan that content, and you can see that something might get scanned and appeared as a driver's license or some other kind of sensitive content, and we can identify that and classify it as well. So those are my two use cases. Just like to talk now about your return on investment. A lot of people look at products like ours and they think, okay, do I really need this? Is this something that I can do with scripts? Can I just address this one problem with this one library and get away with not doing anything or not buying a product like concept searching? Well, the return on investment is really vast, because doing classification on content can have so many different touch points in your organization. Search, of course, if your users can't find information, and that's a known fact, they're going to be a lot less productive. They're going to take a lot more time at the water cooler and a lot less time being productive and getting the job done. And there's a lot of cost savings in getting better quality content for that. Security is a massive space, and being able to identify non-secure content and secure it is going to both protect you from leaks as well as help you manage audits. Records management, there's no harder place to get funding for than a records management project, I believe. But it is important, and we do, under many rules, have to keep records for a certain amount of time. The other thing about records management is important is that managing this content is going to make it a lot easier on our life to be able to know when we should keep and dispose of content, to declutter, if you will. Also, having good metadata is going to help you drive business processes. And we've had a number of cases where companies have been able to use that metadata that we can write to content to surface content and combine content to drive revenue generating projects. And of course, information governance. If you don't have proper metadata on your content, you can't really govern it at all. So that's about it for time for me. We'd like to keep this to 45 minutes, and I think I'm pretty much at that. So I'll just say that the next steps are to look out for other webinars that we have coming up. Come to our website and check those future webinars if you're interested in that. Also, feel free to fill out the form on the website or contact me directly. My email address and contact information is on the next page. But please do contact me directly if you have any other questions, or if you'd like to see a demo of the product. I'd love to go in more depth about your specific use cases. So I'd just like to end by thanking you all for spending an hour or 45 minutes with me today, and I hope to hear from you.